Um, doo-doo-doo. All right, okay. So
Gonna
I
launch this
think
into our
we
Discord.
are live. So yeah, I'm gonna wait for the chat to just confirm to me that we are okay to go. If we are okay to go, then hello everyone in chat. Welcome to Discussing Resilient channel, but hello and welcome to the Chaos Pantheon. So this is an idea that we wanted to do where we have our god dedicated legions, and inside those we have god dedicated players such as myself, Dara, and David here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second as soon as you guys let me know that you can basically hear everything. And yeah, we'll get straight into it. The idea is we're just going to cover chaos in general, sort of like talk all about us. People are saying we're live, so I'm pretty sure that means we're good. And I'm sure they can hear us. That's awesome. So before we get anywhere, I'm going to let the other two introduce themselves. You probably know my dumb ass because this is my channel and whatnot. So we'll go with Mr. Thousand Sun himself. What is your name, sir, and what are you here for?
I'm David. I've got my own podcast dedicated to Thousand Suns. It's been going for a while. I've basically been playing Thousand Suns since they came out, which was back in God, it was like 2017 or something when Magnus showed up. And yeah, just been doing tournaments since then, and pretty much just hanging out in the mid tables. So, but I love the army. I pretty much focus on trying to get as good as I can with it. It's not the easiest army to play, but yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's pretty much it.
Speaking of not the easiest to play, hi Dara, how you doing?
Yo.
Run forward and smack.
Yeah, well, single red brain cell kind of vibes. Yeah. What's up, everyone? If you don't know me already, I'm Dara from the Red Path, part of a YouTube group that basically makes content fully solely focused around world leaders. We have a good time there, fairly similar to David. I love hanging out in the mid tables at tournaments, occasionally drift towards the top before my wings are clipped and sent back down to my people where I belong. But yeah, like really excited to be here, man. It's really cool to be on discussing the resilience. Big fan, as you might know. And yeah, looking forward to chatting all things chaos this evening and getting into the good stuff.
Yeah, so obviously tonight's topic, we all know there is a balanced data slate looming a couple of weeks away. I think is what we've heard from GW. All right, guys. I think that's what they said. Something
Yeah,
like
I'm
this.
guessing like Thursday week we're gonna get that update.
So obviously that's going to change a lot. So what I wanted to do in this one is basically have us all look at how our factions, currently doing. People in the chat saying, "Where's the Emperor's Children?" Sorry, no book, no getting. This the book codex only club, or at least index. But I'm sure they'll be coming, and when we do, I will make a nice purple slide and get them on here as well, or pink, whatever they prefer. But yeah, so we're going to sort of recap how the current season, we'll say it's like a season, isn't it? How we feel our army's done in the current season, how we feel that they are feeling to play, whether we're happy with it, whether we want some changes, and then obviously we'll then look forward to the future. We'll talk about what we would like to see, our hopes, our fears. Will Plague Surgeon finally be playable? Probably not. We will see, but we'll talk about that, and then obviously because we have had two recent codexes lately, of which I'm sure there are no strong opinions on the internet at all about either of them. We will touch on those and what we think their impact on the meta is going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and obviously chat, feel free to join in, ask questions to any of the lads there, myself, David, or Dara. I'll read them out in case they've not got it open. If they've got it open, feel free to reply yourself, guys. But yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off in the land of magic itself. So David, do you want to talk to us about Thousand Suns in the current game?
Yeah, man, I don't know where to start other than going back to I have to go back to the last edition basically. So Thousand Suns are doing pretty well right now, I would say. They're probably in and around like the higher end of 50% from a win rate perspective. And we see it's an interesting army because there's plenty of really good players that show up with Thousand Suns, but there's not a lot that just sit in main Thousand Suns, and they sit in that as like that's the alley I play from, which is interesting because you'll have folks like Manny and Vic and those guys. They show up and they'll dominate a tournament with Thousand Suns, and then everybody's kind of picking it apart, obviously trying to figure out like, well, what makes the list work and things like that. Um, so this edition's been kind of interesting. 10th has because it's the first edition where Magnus is like the main component to every single Thousand Suns list. So I actually last week went and ran some stats looking through all the lists from tournaments basically in the current data slate, and 100% of every single list taken to a major had Magnus in it, and 100% had Aramon in it, which was kind of like, I can't find one list where someone didn't take one.
That's mad.
One of the, yeah, I mean, it was just very interesting. And then the rest of it, pretty much, we made a mistake in 8th edition, in my opinion, GW did, where they gave us all the Age of Sigmar units, right? So we had Zangors and Mutalisks and things like that. They brought those over to fill the Codex out for us. They were too good at the time, so it basically became Codex Zangors. And everybody hated that because it was like, well, I signed up for Rubric Marines and Magnus and Magic and all that crap. And so in 9th edition, thankfully, they pivoted away from that and finally kind of fixed that. And it was like, okay, you know, they made it Rubric Marines, Scarable Cult Terminators, Magnus, you know, just a smattering of like the core of what you think of Thousand Suns when you take them. And it's still carried over into 10th edition, but I think they're still struggling, generally speaking, with the army, figuring out how to make it magic based, but then we don't know what to do with the rest of the stuff. So right now it's pretty much just like everything that gives you Cabal points, some screening chaff units, forget about the rest of the Codex, and that's it. And it works, but it's kind of boring. And I think most Thousand Suns players right now are probably in a state where we've been waiting long enough, I think, to get the rest, basically get the Death Guard treatment, where they, you know, fill out the rest of the units and everything in the Codex. So right now, I don't know whether we're going to get a nerf or not, but I ran a poll on our Discord server, and it's a 2-to-1 thinking we're going to get a nerf. So I don't know why we're going to get a nerf.
Look at Dara laughing.
Sounds like
he's like, ha ha ha, magic go bad.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're going to get one, but yeah, I guess.
Magic man. Yeah, that is pretty weird though. Like, I feel like Thousand Suns are like in a place where World Leaders were before the previous balance update, where we were all kind of like, are we going to get nerfed? We don't think we deserve to be, but like maybe. And then we were. So I'm guessing it's probably going to happen.
We got hit real bad in the early part because out of the gates in 10th, we were really good. Thousand Suns were right there with Eldar. And I think Eldar just kind of had, you know, maybe it's just they had more concentration of better players that are in there that just like Ben Jurek is one of them, I think, that just was able to kind of start showing like, you know, I was at Tacoma when he won the Tacoma tournament. I think that was the first big event there. And I remember it was the thousand, it took us like 2 or 3 months to really kind of solidify around a list. And I think it was Vic towards like the middle of the fall where we really saw like the Infernal Masters, all the Flamers, the Rhinos, like the, you know, just basically what became kind of the mold for the army there. And then we took a pretty bad nerf. And then after that, we've been pretty much just kind of back to figuring out, well, you know, what do we do and what works? And I guess the meta's kind of shifted a little bit and come back to us maybe a little bit in the most recent data slate. And I don't know. I mean, it worries me that Custodes are taking as big a hit as they are with their Codex, very clearly just from a rules perspective, which makes me worry because they're one of the armies that, you know, statistically does keep us in check, just because they have so much defense against us. I don't know whether that means, hey, this is the time where we're gonna now hit Thousand Suns with some reductions on things, or we're gonna tone some stuff down.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that you have 100%, especially in mages and above, take on Magnus. Me and Dara have talked before about non-Gron, Angron, non-Morty, and I think in Ards, it's genuinely like an actual decision to be made, and you can play either or. But when it comes to T-Suns, I think that they could put Magnus to 550 points. I think you still take him.
Please don't. Please don't.
No, I don't want. I'm not saying I want
but
them
you're
to,
right.
But that is because I think there's a good level of it having a Primarch that genuinely enables stuff like you know, build arounds and certain lists that can be built around. Like I could do like an indirect build around that. Dara obviously has the absurdly broken mechanic if you're very lucky playing Yahtzee, and where he can
relax.
He can keep bringing him back. But I think when it comes to Magnus, it's just he brings so much. Just he's like the core of the army, and I don't, like you said, because there's really right now you kind of just see rubrics, characters, Magnus. maybe Vortex Beast you see a little bit as well. And obviously you can get, some chaff stuff for screening, but let's be honest, we can take anything in our books to be screening. I can take Cultist of Poxwell because it's a cheap unit that stands there and gets in the way of stuff. When it comes to Magnus, is there actually any discussion to be had about not taking a Magnus, or is it genuinely like that is not in the question? You 100% are playing Magnus. And also thank you, Lazy Chicken, for the gifted membership in the chat. Congrats, David Irving, on that one. So go on, mate.
So I think you nailed it in that the other codexes right now are World Eaters and Death Guard have a decision to make there. Like, there are viable builds that you can consider without Primarchs in it. Doesn't mean they're optimal, but they're there. There's not even a build consideration without Magnus right now. The way they've written the rules for them is very, very centric around Magnus. And the main part of it is the fact that he's giving +1 to hit and wound to everything around him, which, generally speaking, outside of that, we don't really have a lot of mechanics that do that. He's the only one that really gives us +1 to hit. Only thing that really gives us +1 to wound. The rubrics do get rerolls when stuff is on objectives, which is nice. But other than that, otherwise it's just you're wounding on 5s or 6s. Like, if you attach Aramon to it, you get +1 to wound. But generally speaking, you don't have a lot of other mechanics to give you good, like, punch up mechanics into stuff that you otherwise would need, like mortal wounds or something like that to get through. And it's very clear that from a design perspective, they want Magnus to be like the center point of the army. Like, when you think Thousand Suns, you think Magnus, and just from a expectation standpoint, and you come to play the list, that's when you're thinking about who you build around in Thousand Suns, it's either him or Aramon, right? It's always been one of those two, and right now it just happens to be both. I think they could move away from that when they get to, like, the Codex and they get to, like, redoing the rules and kind of fleshing out the rest of the detachments that Thousand Suns gets. But in terms of the rest of everything, I think there's no decision on Magnus. It's you take him, you build around him, and other players I've heard say the exact same thing that you did. Is you could raise him to 600 points. We're still going to take him. He's that good. He's that much of a central focus. You've got the stratagems to reroll hits and wounds with them, things like that.
Yeah, that's +1 to hit and wound with full rerolls on Magnus is just wild.
Right now I would say he's, like, harder to kill and more dangerous in combat than Angron is. Like, if Angron goes into Magnus, he probably doesn't kill Magnus, and then Magnus probably kills Angron back. So it's just like, this is the world that Thousand Suns players are living in right now.
Magnus hates lots of little shots. You hate taking lots of 1 damage shots. The thing, it's hilarious. I've played some friends of mine run Eldar, and when I play them, it's they're scatter lasers that just annoy the hell out of me. And they'll, I think they use the scout bikes and they'll get lethal hits on them or whatever. And you basically just get to a point where you're taking so many saves that it's annoying. It doesn't matter if they're 2-up saves. You're just taking so many. Your damage reduction doesn't matter. And then it takes out the blanking stratagem that we have, where you can just blank one of the failed saves. That or dev wounds really becomes a scary thing for Magnus. So, it's interesting with Thousand Suns, because I find that the players that do play into Thousand Suns the first time, they play so weird versus a lot of other armies. Their mechanics are just completely different than most of what you see from other armies in the game. That a lot of times we suffer from, like, the bad impression syndrome, where it's different and you weren't prepared for it. So does that mean it's imbalanced, right? Like, is the reaction that, for some people, that I don't know that it's a fair reaction when they first see it, and it's like, okay, they need to be nerfed. That's way too good.
There's definitely a feeling when you get your first double Doombolt, or you get your first armor save taken away, and you're like, that was something.
Yeah.
All right, right. And one interesting thing I'd noticed when you mentioned it there about rubrics, giving the rerolls to wound, is the way our armies interact with characters is actually quite different between us. So, Thousand Suns, I feel like you are more using your units to give the buff to the character rather than the character give the buff to the unit. Death Guard, it's definitely character give buff to the unit. And then World Eaters, you're not super really character dependent on getting buffs. Like 8-bound don't run with characters. Obviously, we have Mo, legend Mo. But
God bless.
But Mo in himself is extremely scary, and he doesn't pass his full rerolls to hit wound to his squad. He gives them fight first, which is big. But part of that, you don't really run tons of attached characters in World Eaters. So I run tons to buff my guys. David runs tons to buff his actual characters. But you just kind of like exist in this space where it's like I can take or leave characters, I guess.
I run dudes to protect my characters, basically.
Meat shields,
You know, well, Karen is great for that, right? Because he gives the squad reroll hits and wounds of 1, which is like super solid. But like that's just one dude, right? And also like we just don't have that depth of character choice that you guys have. Like we've got Karen, we've got Mo, and we've got Angron, and that's functionally it. Unless you want to count in Vicatus, he was just like his own sort of thing. And we don't talk about the Juggerlord. So like, you know. But then you got things like, I don't know, a lot of our characters kind of just like want to live their best lives by themselves, like the Demon Prince as well. You know, he just kind of walks around. It's kind of interesting. Our characters are very selfish, I would say, and the squads are just there to sort of be meat shields for them. Or obviously, then if you're skewing towards the Demon Prince, is a completely different thing. But yeah, I feel like World Leaders are weird because like you want like probably 4 to 5 characters in every list. But the synergies are just really weird that come out of that. You know, it's not really like big auras or anything, unless it's the prince. It's mostly just like this one dude is going to help his one squad, so you got to be careful about making that one kind of block work. Otherwise, it's bad. But yeah, it's completely different how Tizcans function in terms of the Cabal, and then Deck Guard in terms of like, I'll put this guy in here, and now that whole unit is like scary.
Lethal vibes.
Yeah, it's a very different kind of vibe, I think, which is I don't know, it's kind of like how I would expect World Leaders to be. Like the characters aren't going to care about the dudes around them, you know.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. So coming on to Thousand Suns, then to sort of like round out sort of like your feeling on them in the current meta. If you were to look at the army right now, there's no denial that the army is powerful. I think we can all say that in the right hands. Potentially, like maybe that's something we can talk about in a sec. Is it player approachable? From like if you were a new person, you go into the game, you're like, oh, this Egyptian fiend army looks really cool. Is it approachable in that sense? But also there is a lot of armies that we've had in the game before and currently where the power level might be up here, but the sort of like fun and like representation of how I feel it should play is down here, or maybe like the list variety is like down here. Where would you kind of put Thousand Suns on that sort of scale of, should we say, we'll go first on like the scale of competitiveness, and then we'll say the scale of the more fun side of it.
So I think with T-Suns, the skill floor is pretty high. I think it's the kind of army I've seen really good players that these are like top tournament players that I've seen them pick the army up and play, and their first couple games, it's a lot of sorting stuff out. It's a lot of, how does that work? And how does this mechanic work? And trying to feel all the different pieces out can be kind of a struggle, but it's not impossible to pick up like any other army. I mean, I think it just takes some time and everybody kind of learns at their own pace there. But I would say that Thousand Suns are not the kind of army where it's going to forgive mistakes. And that's kind of the hard part to it, because it can discourage players that pick it up for the first time, try to play it and realize that this is nothing like I thought it was going to be. You know, I read about all these different things people are doing, and they get in and it doesn't work that way, or they don't know when the situation is to use a certain strat or play a certain way. The ceiling, I think, is pretty high as well. So I think, I mean, obviously demonstrated by some folks. I think even just this weekend, Manny is doing phenomenal at the team tournament that's happening this weekend. And I think he took on, lists that I thought would be really, really tough for T-Suns, and he just 20-0'd all the lists. And that kind of surprised me. So there's definitely play at the top level with them. So yeah, I would say though, to people who think about Thousand Suns, I mean personally, I'm sure you guys have differing opinions on this, but my impression is they're the best looking army in the game. That's kind of what drew me to them. And I think if you think they look cool, just play them, because the reality is, at the end of the day, anything that's bad in your codex is someday going to be good. Right. So if you like your army and you want to collect it, keep buying the stuff that you think is cool, paint it up, and eventually it's going to have its day in the limelight. So
look at the Mutiny Vortex Beast. No one ever thought that'd be good.
Oh, man.
No, and I had three. I had three of them back in 8th edition. I had three of them that I took to my first tournament, and I won my first game with them. I'm thinking, oh wow, I've got something here, and then just tanked the rest of the games with it. And I've been basically sitting with those things on the shelves since this edition. And hey, guess what? Now we can use them.
So what about on the? So obviously that's competitive wise. How do you feel like T-Suns are from the sort of like reflection of how you think they should play onto the tabletop, in that sense at the moment in the current game?
So this is where I think we need the Death Guard treatment, in my opinion. We haven't had a lot of new injection of models or stuff that really makes the army look like its own thing. I was really happy to see
downs.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that for them. I'm happy to have the Codex for Thousand Suns, and I'm glad to see it actually gets a lot of play and it has a lot of interest, so it's going to stick around. But at the same point, there comes a time where you do need to get kind of like a range update. And I was just talking about this in Discord today, and that I'm willing, from a player's perspective, I'm willing to trade out stuff like, maybe Vindicators or maybe stuff like the Defiler or the Mauler Fiend, where Mauler Fiend's a great example. You were just talking about the Mutalith. The two of them share a lot of overlap, and right now the Mutalith sees all the play because of its interaction with the army. It's got the Cabal. It doubles the range for any Cabal powers. So no one's really taking the Mauler Fiend, even though in close combat it's actually stats out a little bit better if I remember right. So things like that where there's a lot of redundancy on stuff that just nobody takes. I'd like to see some of that stuff get filled out. Like from Horus Heresy, we had stuff like the Osiris Dreadnoughts that had. What are we supposed to do with our dead sorcerers? Are we just going to give up on them?
Very quickly, you're on a Death Guard channel. We don't talk about anything Contemptor chassis. We will all break down and start crying if someone mentions the word Volcon, okay? So just be careful where you're going with this. A Siren pattern Dreadnought, definitely not related to Contemptor pattern Dreadnought.
I said Osiris, I did not say that other C word. Okay, so yes. But then we have, if you think about it, Thousand Suns, outside of Zangors and outside some big stuff, we don't really have like the melee Rubric Marines. That would be great to see.
Oh, what,
we
the
don't
have and stuff,
Yeah. Or, even like we seem to have forgotten how to do like heavy weapon teams. Like all we do is walk around. We just get one Soul Reaper. That's it. No, we're not deviating from that. That's our lane, right? So, like a Rubric heavy weapon team or something that had like las cannons or maybe dark lances or something like those stats would be pretty cool. And then we have no. Other than what we're finally getting in this edition, it's the first edition where we've actually had some kind of indirect mechanic. We don't really have any like artillery or anything. I'm super jealous of Playburst Callers right now. Yeah. They are so cool.
They're really cool.
But in general, I would say, yeah. If you pick them up and read the Codex and you're like, okay, I want to put them on the table, I would say generally speaking, yeah. If you're just trying to play the army for fun, you're going to get a good feeling with the army when you go and put them on the table and feel like, all right, I'm getting what I opened and signed up for.
Nice. Cool. Okay, so speaking of armies that do what they say on the tin, Mr. Bloodman up there, would you like to talk to us a bit about your army and how you feel they are doing in the current state of it? Because I think, weirdly enough, I'm sat here on my little unnerfed throne and you two have been slapped a bit. Probably, T-Sun's got a little bit of a slapless time, but out of nowhere from the left field, you got dunked from the top rope by GW a bit. How's things been since?
It's an interesting story. I think it's like, I don't know, I did a video on this on the channel last week, breaking down like the stats available on StatCheck for like how we've been doing, the world leaders, since the balanced dataslate. And it was like super interesting, right? Because so we're averaging out at like a mid to high 40% win rate, but like there's almost no one in our player base that is getting that win rate. It's either people who are doing super, super bad or people who are doing like quite good with the army. So our win rate is just the average of that. Which kind of tells a lot about how the world leaders are doing right now. You're either seeing good success with them, or you're having a really rough time. And I think that's like a little bit problematic to me. I'm doing okay with them. I'm like having a good time personally myself. I'm enjoying them a lot. I'm having fun with the builds. But I think for a lot of people getting into the competitive side of things with world leaders right now, they're really struggling because the army is quite thin on the grounds. Like you don't get a lot for your points with the world leaders, and the result of that is that you have to be really careful with managing your forces, and as soon as you make a mistake you get punished severely. That's really bad for new players that are trying to like work out how the army works, and maybe they hop into Discord or they like, you know, watch a couple of videos on YouTube and they see like people like me talking about all these like complex mechanics like rhino drifting or like, you know, here's how you get around custodes and all this other stuff. And they try and put that into practice, and it just doesn't work because like there's a certain amount of like, you know, kind of skill that you won't have when you start playing this army. And then I think a lot of people, when they, you know, go to a tournament, go 0-5 or 1-4, they'll put that army down because it just won't feel like it's working in their hands and they can't really work out where it's gone wrong. And I think overall that's kind of where the world leaders are right now. You're either like doing quite well with them and having a good time, or you're being battered around the place by custode players, which is like obviously one of the armies that's like really keeping us pushed down at the minute, and like suppressing our win rate heavily. That and Necrons, which are obviously the two most represented factions in the game right now. So yeah, it's a very interesting time to be a World Leaders player. I think like overall, from my perspective, we are probably better than our overall stats say, but that's only true if you have a certain amount of like pre-existing skill when you're running this faction. So that kind of leaves me at a point where I'm a little bit worried of if we get a light buff in this next balance pass, which is kind of what I'm expecting to happen, that the that field between those lower level players and the higher level players gets even wider, and the whole like way to balance the world leaders just becomes more complex. It depends how deep GW are looking into the stats. Like, I don't know if they've taken this deep of a dive into like our win rates and like parsed out the player pool based on like elo and stuff. But yeah, that's what I did, and it was messed up going through it. I was kind of like, ooh, this is weird. But yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. So not terrible, not amazing. Maybe both at the same time. I don't know.
That's a fair way to put it. But so when it comes to, I'll ask you the same, obviously, same kind of questions as David there. So when it comes to representing world eaters that we've read about, we've seen about, you hear about, transferring that to the tabletop, do world eaters do a good, like if you were, like I said, if you were Jimbo, you've just walked into the store, you're like, that is the coolest model, he's pointing at an Angron or an 8-bound or something like that, he's picked it up, he's bought it, he's built it. When he goes to take that to the table, is that going to feel like world eaters?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I actually love our rules at the minute. They're really like capture the whole kind of faction in terms of like, it goes super fast, which is great, and it hits you like a freight train, which is also great. And like, you know, the whole like mash W philosophy is like the world leaders thing, where it's just like full send it forward, which I think is actually part of the reason why some of our players are really struggling, because like if you full send incorrectly, and put the wrong things in the wrong places, you just get deleted. But if you full send correctly, you will win your games. Not saying that that's like the only way to play world leaders. Like I don't do that approach myself, but like I reckon that's where a lot of the issue is going, because like, you know, you ask
cowardice, Dara.
Right, sure. I call it tactical nuance, but like if you think about it, right, you're like a world leaders player going to your first tournament, and you're like, I'm gonna go on Reddit and ask like the good people of Warhammer Competitive, how do I play world leaders? And I would say like 9 out of 10 answers are just like, just run forward, bro, advance and charge, plus you move, you win the game. And then they try and do that, and they're like, huh, that's a screen.
Oh no, like, 10 cultists.
Oh dear. I guess I lose. But like, I mean, apart from that, like they really feel great on the tabletop. Like, our rule set is so powerful. Our like points costs are super high, which kind of offsets our really powerful rules. But I would say, like, out of the three factions, so T-Sons, Death Guard, and World Eaters, I think we have the most powerful, like, rules on paper in terms of, like, you read that and it's just like, oh, wow, that's really good. Death Guard is, like, probably, in my opinion, the weakest, but you're also by far the cheapest, right?
Yay.
So you can kind of, like, flood the board with dudes. T-Sons, I don't think are, like, that far off World Leaders, to be honest. Like, their rules are super powerful because, as David was saying, they're so different that, like, people are really unsure how to play around them. World Leaders are not that. They're just like, this rule is powerful. I show it to you. You understand that it is powerful because it is just big numbers. And that's kind of how it works.
Big number, go smash.
Yeah, right.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. Can I ask a question real quick? So terrain wise for you, do you play on in your area? Do you play on like WTC or UKTC or GW? Like, what's the dominant terrain style there for you?
I would say, like, so most of the time I fly to England to attend events, which will be UKTC. But in Ireland, it's very heavily WTC biased. So when I'm playing here, it's going to be WTC. When I'm playing in England, it's nearly always UKTC. Occasionally, I will do a GW event, which is, like, by far and away the easiest one for World Eaters. That tournament, or that terrain set out, is, like, so good for us, and UKTC is quite tough. But I like the challenge of UKTC. It, like, poses some really interesting, like, puzzles to try and work out, especially the current mission pack. There's some really cool stuff in there, which I really like. So, like, my favorite, if I want to win, is GW. But my favorite for, like, an interesting game is UKTC.
Never actually
I was
played
curious
on GW.
because for us, we're starting to get a little bit more mix of the different terrain, especially with teams catching on pretty heavily in the last year. And you know, from what I see, there isn't a lot of a difference between the Thousand Suns lists that show up for different events. It's kind of like, well, this is what we do, and we just kind of show up with it, and we do a little style tweaks here depending on what we're trying to accomplish. But for like a melee army, I wasn't sure if that was, especially like World Eaters, whether that your list concept completely changes or not.
Oh yeah, it does for sure. Like, in the US, we've seen people do really well with, like, double Corn Lord of Skulls, or Michael from Team Red Path. He came second, went like 5-0, 6-0 at Cascade Clash with 3 Mauler Fiends and 2 Forge Fiends. Like, you just can't do that type of stuff in UKTC. It just doesn't work at all. You know, it's like you're trying to move around like a traffic jam. It doesn't really work that well in WTC either. So it's definitely, like, there is a lot of factors to consider. It's more like the big toys. Can you run them or not? Like, Lord of Skulls are completely dependent on the terrain layout. They're, like, basically never seen in England, but in America, yeah, they crop up quite a lot. So there is a bit of list diversity across, like, geographic regions as a result of that, I would say.
I would say that we do see that difference in Mutaliths. Like, in the US here, running multiple Mutalith beasts kind of has been kind of like the thing right now. But on the heavier terrain density, especially on a couple of the maps, you know, it's a long haul to get around all the ruins and get to the middle, which is where the Mutalists kind of want to hang out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, you kind of have to consider that I would say 90% of the lists are going to be running Angron as well, and that's, like, the most important piece to be able to move around the board. So if you have anything that's going to sort of be annoying to move around as well or get in his way, it's just going to be a disaster, right?
Yeah, those new fly rules in 10th are brutal. For, like, it used to be just zoom right over the ruins, right?
It was amazing. Old WTC in 9th edition, Angron just lived in the Super L, and he was like, I have, like, a 30-inch threat range that you can't come near this building. I was like, this is amazing. And now he's like, I'm trapped in the Super L. I can't get out.
This home has become my prison.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the health of the game, probably a better thing. But, like, and I mean, he still moves, like, dumb fast, right? Like, those little runes in the middle of the UKTC might as well not exist to him. He's just like, up and over, let's go. You know?
I have to sit here and watch Magnus double moving, Angron moving 50 inches, and I'm just like, cool, Morty moves 10. Like,
dude, like,
we can triple move if we set it up correctly.
Oh god.
Yeah, Magnus and Angron are, like, dope, you know? They are, like, proper Primarch models, and then Mortarion is, like, Am I a Primarch or am I like a Lord and Terminator armor with the stats that I've got? You know, he's so
Ow.
lame.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, we'll talk about it quickly. Primarchs are an interesting thing. Some people love Primarch, some people don't. I'm personally not too fussed about Primarch. I can give or take more, but genuinely, people sometimes get into Chaos factions solely based off the Primarch. We know that's true. We all have Primarchs. Thankfully, we have Morty, Magnus, and Angron, obviously. I want you to quickly, off the top of your head, rate your Primarch out of 10.
10.
I would say.
I think the Magnus is the
Oh, sorry, I missed that opportunity. Yeah. I'm going to go back 9.
No,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, listen.
don't you? It actually makes sense. 987.
I think that's like actually like funnily enough quite accurate. Yeah. I don't know. I think Ron is definitely like 8.5, pushing a 9. I would say like he is, but it's weird because he's just completely polarized around the fact of like, do I res or not? You know, which is really problematic mechanic for a lot of different reasons. But I think like on paper he's like an 8 for sure.
Do you feel like your guys' Primarchs represent themselves on the table accurately? Like,
yeah,
I definitely. I mean, it's a kind of a dumb question because I know the answer is yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, Magnus does all the tricksy stuff. His psychic is absolutely devastating. Like again, he's got the tricks. He can do all the little fancy things with the Cabal rituals. Psychic, even like indirect on psychic. Magnus is like a literal one-man spell slinging machine. And even then, and in melee, he still holds up to a Primarch level. Potentially even, like Dara said before, potentially even more so than Angron to a degree. But I think that's more because of the fact that you have like the defensive layers that Angron lacks, because you can like zero out damage, reroll save, whereas Angron is just. And don't worry, I think Angron as well really like embodies Angron on the table, because that dude might as well just say cruise missile on him, because that man is a fire and forget, and it's. Go, you tell me about your Primarch. Go on, you tell me about him. Why
but I mean, that's completely right. He's just like a giant red ball of muscle with like spiky bits attached, and he just flies forward and just destroys stuff, you know? Like, when he feels good to use, he feels amazing. You know, it's like, this is Angron. And like, obviously, like, Resurrection is like such a big part of his, like, you know, lore and personality, right? You know, it's like, it's what he does. But like, the way that is implemented in the actual game is like highly problematic. That's like my biggest issue, and most people's biggest issue with Angron is like how that res works. I think it was better in ninth when there was a certain degree of like surety about it. Like you kind of knew he was coming back at a certain point, and I would much rather see like that come back for him. I think if that changed so that like both players at the table would know like this guy is coming back, the way that I've suggested it before is like you take the blood dice, right? So you've got 8 of them when you throw them and you get your buffs or whatever. If you want to bring back Angron, you remove 3 of them from your pool for the rest of the game and he respawns. So it's like he will come back, but you are pretty much getting rid of like a lot of the good options on the blood dice. You're probably only going to have 1 buff at a time for the rest of the game, and it's going to be hard to get your good buffs like advance and charge and fight on death and stuff like that. So that's like one way where I'm like, both players know that he will probably come back once. In theory, he could come back twice. If he comes back twice, you're not going to have an army rule after that. So like that's like one of the ways where I'm like, that would be better rather than just like, oops, 666, you know? Okay.
That'd be cool.
Just doesn't feel great.
So in terms of Magnus, who's on the other end of the sort of spectrum here, thank you very much, Rins Gravity, for the $5 super chat there. Hiya from the Emperor's Children. Mate, hang in there. Your book will be coming, we promise you. And as soon as the book's here, we'll have a nice purple slide on this, and we'll have the Emperor's Children.
We're going to find out. We're probably going to find out when the Chaos Space Marine Codex drops.
Yeah, their codex this edition. Yeah, good point.
Exactly.
Good point.
Very true.
So to Magnus, so Angron plays like Angron plays. Magnus, on terms of the field, let's remove power level. So we're not thinking about how much, even though he's insane. Does Magnus feel like Magnus?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he, when you read about him in the lore, he pretty much like deletes stuff with his gaze, like Space Wolf characters. That's pretty much, he has that kind of mentality in the game where he just kind of looks at something and goes, okay, I'd like you to be gone from existence right now. And that's what he does. He also moves pretty quick. Generally speaking, he has the tricks of like the defensive capabilities and everything. I'm not sure I'm I'm going to sound kind of awful here, but I'm not sure that that's really his thing. Whether it's always been interesting with Tzeentch, because Tzeentch and Nurgle kind of both have that durable kind of MO going for them.
Yeah, I think there's two ways they should go about it. I think yours should be like tricksy, whereas mine should just be this guy is a wall of meat. Like,
yeah, I kind of like that way Magnus has the like, boom, I zeroed that damage specifically, because that's way more tricksy. Whereas like Mortarion should just be like, I am tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what's stopping them from raising him to like T14 or something awesome like that? Like,
that would be cool.
Yeah, so I mean,
make him tougher than the monolith.
if we cover, I mean, if we're going to talk about Morty is as a Primarch, I think he is powerful for the wrong reasons. And I think that he does do a good job on the tabletop for what he does. He's also way cheaper than your Primarchs, probably for a reason. But I think Morty's translation to the tabletop and the lore is just not correct at the moment.
He's really embodying that, like, the grandfather part of Grandfather Nurgle.
Yeah,
where he's just like some old dude walking around.
Yeah, he kind of like I mean, in the lore, he did invent the Plague Dust Crawl, so maybe he's just really proud of them and like just, taking them for walks with him. So
inspired.
It's possibly that. His auras are fantastic. Like reroll 1 to wound is always nice to have. It's nowhere near as good as +1 to hit and wound, but reroll 1 is cute. Always having cover is kind of redundant because of the addition, because it's so easy to get cover. The main one is obviously the ignore modifiers, which is insane. Now, we have seen a change to Trajan recently, which is probably going to happen in that front. But the problem is, why he's like a weird support piece that just wants to stay near things, whereas in like for 30k rules, this guy could literally like teleport every turn. He'd like the aspect of death, he'd move from the board, deep strike somewhere else. Now, I don't think you should have a T12 teleported monster everywhere. It would be very cool.
Let's go. Up and down you Mortarion, just like
Martin.
the Shard of Catan in the Death Guard army now.
It would be cool and it would be very unique. But even in terms of resilience, like he's pretty tough. I won't say he's not tough. He's still T12, feel no pain is nice. But he's just, I don't know, there's somewhat lacking. He still dies to dedicated firepower. And the main problem is he's supposed to be like the Grim Reaper. He's supposed to be the aspect of death. And then he hits something and you have 5 attacks and you're like, cool. I have 5 attacks with no to reroll the hit, and I only reroll 1s to wound. So it's like, there's a good chance I'm doing like 4 to 8 damage to something, and that's about it.
I just wish he had this whole thing of like coming up and just like deleting people around him, just like play coming out of him, people like being unable to run away, people like melting and stuff like that. That's what he should be, right? Because like I feel like they really did a good job of capturing Magnus and Angron. And then Mortarion is just like so far from the mark,
Yeah.
And it's a real shame because he's like the coolest looking Primarch, I think.
So, yeah, it is a really cool model. I would like to see him sort of be like this aura of like absolute no want to go zone. So Angron's like the missile that hits you really hard. Magnus is the tricky boy jumping everywhere, casting spells. And Morty's just this guy wherever he moves, he has this area around him that's just dying because it's so rotten and stinky. So like you could even do it. I mean, if you could be lazy, just double up the contagion. If he's in range, if it's his contagion, double up the effect so it becomes horrendous. So it's like -2 to your weapon skill, ballistic skill. I'm not saying that'd be good and healthy. You probably shouldn't do that.
I actually don't really mind that, to be honest. It would be powerful, but at the end of the day, he's a Primarch. It probably should be powerful. You should be as scared of Mortarion as you are of Magnus and Angron, and no one is right now. Everyone sees Mortarion and they're like, lol, and then you see Magnus and like, I am. But I mean, you can't run from Magnus, right? And you can't run from Angron either. Like, Mortarion should be like not quite that, more like the inexorable, like I'm always coming forward. It would just they're just not there right now.
It is what it is. So in chat we got a guy saying, "Is that David Savage? Are you David Savage?" It is. He said he's so Kevin Camerata says that he played you recently at the D-Layer RTT. He's shouting you out in the chat.
I remember that match. That was a really good match we had. Yeah, I remember that.
Awesome. So you can even get opponents here. Another question coming in from Michael Glancy. So this one's for all of us. What do you guys think about the state of your current combat patrol? So I think 2 of us are going to be very polarized to this one, and I think 1 of us is going to be quite happy with his one. So again, we'll do the usual order. So David, how do you feel about Combat Patrol Zangor?
Yeah, that's all I got. Not happy. I mean, I don't know what they did this edition. It was kind of like you will buy Zangors and you will like it, despite nobody really taking Zangors. And now we're finally starting to take Zangors. So maybe they were just trying to get us to wake up.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I'm not a fan of it.
I'm just going to quickly throw my 2 pence in because Dara's actually got an interesting one. Combat Patrol Poxwalkers. It's cool. Like, zombies are cool, but the problem is, like, it would have been cooler when the Codex comes out and there's a detachment based around them or something like that. As of right now, like, 20 Poxwalkers would have been cool with something else. 30? Oh, like, cool 30 Poxwalkers. Like, again, neither me nor David bought into Death Guard and Thousand Suns respectively because we were like, yes, I want to play Goatmen, or yes, I want zombies. Like, I want the Plague Marines, I want the Death Shroud, and I'm sure it's the same for you up there with, your Scarab Occult and Plague Marines. And funnily enough, one of these box sets does actually have a good amount of the actual Marines in it. Hi, Dara.
Yeah, man, our Combat Patrol is stacked. It's like 20 Berserkers in the box, It's amazing. You get the Juggerlord, you can build them as Invocatus, and you got 10 Jackals. Like, all of those things are just good. It's awesome,
See, if it was 10 Poxwalkers and 10 Zangors, we'd be happy if it was other stuff. Instead,
right,
they got the ratio mixed up.
It's weird because it's like you have the template, right? Like the World Eaters one is the perfect template, and they just didn't do that for the other ones. Yeah, it's very strange. I really like that they just, it's like the perfect beginner's box, the World Leaders one. Whenever someone asks me, they're like, I'm starting World Leaders, what do I get? I'm like, you get this box, you get these other kits, and then you're done, So it's like super nice. And it complements the Christmas box set like insanely well. If you buy those two things together, like your army is basically finished. It's amazing.
It's
so
pretty
yeah,
wild.
huge fan. I think I've bought like 3 of the World Leaders Combat Patrol. And like I already have like 100 Berserkers, but I'm just like, yeah, this box is such good value, and I keep buying it. I'm like, okay, I really need to stop doing this now.
Nice.
Yeah.
So just to quickly touch on where we're with the current state of armies. For Death Guard side, I think Death Guard's probably in the best spot it's ever been competitively, probably in the game. I don't think it's oppressive. I don't think it is weak. I feel like there's a bit of skill expression there as well with playing Contagions correctly. Picking the correct one gives you choice to impact the game. And I think probably out of all 3 of our dexes, I think I probably have the most balanced internal index. I probably have the most viable choices. I would only say there's like 2 things that are genuinely hurting your list to take at the moment. Whereas T-Suns, like you said, you have a lot of units that just kind of don't have a place at the moment. And in World Eaters, you have... I think the main issue you 2 guys have on that front is you have a lot of stuff just because you don't have your full ranges yet. It's just like, have the CSM thing, and there you go, make it do something.
Dude, we don't even got the CSM thing, It's like they took that away from us. I want the Vindicators.
Yeah.
I'll take David's Vindicators.
It's so weird you don't have them, yet they do.
Yeah.
But you got the Forge.
I was so disappointed. They took, like in World Eaters, I could be wrong here, but they took away like Raptors or Warp Talons, one of the 2. Yeah, I was so disappointed in that. Like, those are units that belong in World Eaters.
They took both. And yeah, like people used to run 30 Warp Talons and Raptors and stuff. But like, I do think our index is like internally balanced quite well. I think it's quite similar to you actually, Aiden, in the sense of like, there's maybe like the Helldrake and the Defiler, which like actively hurt your list to take. And then I think everything else is pretty okay, I would say.
That's fair play. But I think overall, Death Guard's in a solid spot at the moment. I think it's still hard to push for any of the larger tournament wins because we are still such an honest faction that's just like, I do X thing. You can defeat a lot of Death Guard players with a tape measure by just measuring out distances equal, correctly. Whereas like T-Suns, you got to worry about all these like double moves and stuff like that. World Eaters, obviously, you can't really outspace a tape measure if the tape measure is half of the table. Becomes a little issue. But I think that one of the main things sort of keeping Death Guard up there is, as Dara alluded to before, the combination of the cheap points combined with the ability to hit really hard, probably harder than realistically we should, like thematically. We definitely don't really do attrition warfare at the moment. We do attrition because we have more dudes than you, and we hit way harder than they probably have any right to hit. Like AP4 melee is not hard for us to get at all, whereas every army is like AP2, kind of sitting around there. But We have obviously indirect, which is really, really powerful. I know that's a contentious topic on its own, so we won't go into that too much. But indirect is good. It always has been. And we have multiple builds. And I think one of the key things is that at the moment, especially in the current, and this is one thing that's going to change, is Custodes being quite a gatekeeper army. Especially, like you said, it keeps Thousand Sons in check, in your opinion, and it hurts World Eaters because of, like, fights first and whatnot. Death Guard shit all over Custodes, and it's kind of comical, because anti-infantry 2-up, I reduce your save to a literal 4-up invulnerable, and I make you roll a billion dice, and you die. We have all the tools needed. Again, if you bring Mortarion, they can't use any of the defensive strats or anything like that. So we have all the tools we need to deal with that, which put us in a good position for sort of countering the meta. But as we may have alluded to before, Custodes may have had some slight changes to it, which may impact its representation in competitive play, which might actually open the door for other armies to overperform. Like you said before, it could open the door for T-Sons if they don't get any changes to become absolute menace. And one matchup that Death Guard absolutely hate and fear is T-Sons, because you guys have movement tricks, you hit really hard. Our only thing we've really got going for us is the indirect into the rubrics, and that's going to come down to how many free ups can you fail on your rolls, because if we can kill the rubrics quick and the characters, advantage is ours. If we don't, advantage is definitely T-Sons. It's an interesting matchup. But, I mean, overall, I think Death Guard's in a, like I said, the best position it's ever been competitively. I do think by nature, T-Sons and World Eaters are just naturally kind of more competitive armies. You'll hear it all be said, speed is the most important thing, movement is the most important thing in 40k. Death Guard is never going to be... If I ever get an uppy downy detachment, then something's gone wrong in the design studio. We shouldn't have that, but I'm not going to say we don't have that. But I think going forward, as long as Death Guard sort of keep to the current state it's in, where you have the ability to punch up, you can obviously, we can punch up, we can be sort of in the mid, and you can easily go 4-1. Well, not easily, but a bit of effort, you can get 4-1. Easily, happily go 3-2. I'm quite content with Death Guard in its current state, I'd say overall. So yeah, there's not too much talk on Death Guard really, because I think Death Guard's just in a happy place at the moment.
I think there's really not that much between all three of our armies in terms of like competitive viability and like where the skill floor and respective ceiling is for each of them as well. I actually think like within that grouping, that like kind of three armies, their balance across from them is really interesting, because like I feel like it's maybe a bit tougher to play into Death Guard for World Eaters, but T-Sons is like a little bit easier. So I just find it really interesting that like that's the kind of like environment where it's not quite rock, paper, scissors, but like there is a game into all of them. And I don't feel like I have an auto win into either of them either, which means like, my opponent, be it Death Guard or T-Sons, is going to have a good time as well. So I just find it very interesting that they managed to kind of hit that balance down.
I would say that both of your armies have something going for it that Thousand Sons don't like, and generally speaking, we don't want to be in melee. Like our whole entire army does not want to be in melee. We can get out of it, but we typically hyper aggressive armies. The thing I've hated to see are the 15 or 20 Stody jet bikes that show up, and you just go, all right, well, you're going to rush across turn 1, and I'm going to kill 2 bikes, and then you're going to kill my army. And it's like, that doesn't feel great. But that worries me when I play into World Eaters, and it worries me when I play into Death Guard, is that something of mine has to go sit on the objective, right? So if you're there, I don't want to be there while you're there, because then I'm in combat. And, that I would say that plays pretty well for us. And I would say with Death Guard, it's interesting because I'm seeing the chat from our server see that like Death Guard is actually one of the more challenging matchups for us. And, the Playburst crawlers. Yeah, the Playburst crawlers that you mentioned are one of the things. Indirect for us in general is a real big problem, because if you look at Guard's a big problem for us, especially when they show up. Just they've gone all in on indirect. They've got chimeras, they've got basilisk, manticores, whatever, and you just go, well, I hope I make some saves, and that's not a good feeling.
Yeah, I get that. So it's weird because in ours it's sort of the same, and it kind of, like I said, I think if you have Death Guard and you've bought Trill PBC, and like you said, you get some, because the problem is our artillery is only AP1 naturally. I think if the T-Sun player mispositions and manages to let you get a contagion onto them with -1 save and a boil blight for ignore cover, then yeah, totally free playbook scrolls can pick up 10 rubrics, 100%. And again, you don't really have to kill the character as such, because taking off the rerolls from the squad attached, kill the character is obviously the goal, but even if you don't, taking the full rerolls to wound off them is still a nice hit. But I think it's one of those. It's definitely if the shoe's on the other foot, maybe you haven't bought Plague Burst Callers, or you lose one early because the T-Sun did like a double move, got line of sight, indirected it with Magnus. Then you can be. I do think it's one of these. It's an interesting matchup where, whichever way it goes, I think it's a very snowbally game for one of our sides. If I start picking up rubrics before you've done enough damage, I snowball you. Whereas if you pick up my ability to interact with your units and take away your Cabal points, you can snowball me. So it's quite an interesting matchup, to be honest. Whereas
I don't think there's any snowball on the World Leaders front, at least in the T-Suns. Like, my regular practice buddy pretty much mains T-Suns. And like at the end of every game, always goes to turn 5, and we have like 2 models each left at the end of the game. We're like sweating buckets, and it's like a 3-point victory, generally to the World Leaders. But my God, did it feel like a loss? The only reason I can do it is because Mo still walks in and he still claps Magnus, and I'm just like, all right, cool, man, you do what you need to do, and we're gonna be fine. But yeah, it's a real tough game. I actually really love the T-Suns game though. Like, I haven't played it against that big a variety of opponents because, I mean, like Dave said, like there's not really that many T-Suns players out there,
Yeah, it's definitely.
But like I feel like when I come up against them, I'm always super scared because I'm like, oh, you could be really good. I'm pretty nervous about this game now. Whereas like Deck Guard is like so popular, it's like I don't really know what I'm getting into when I play against someone. I'm like, you could be trash or you could be like actually really good, but T-Suns, I'm like, generally, you're probably going to be pretty good. So I'm pretty stressed about that.
We had probably one of the most hilarious LVOs because collectively, a lot of us know each other, and a bunch of us were there. There was probably like 12 of us in the field out of like 800 people at LVO. And on day one, I think before the first like 4 matches were over, I think there was probably like 3 or 4 mirror matches between us out of all of us being there. I had 2 mirror matches into T-Suns at LVO, which was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen happen.
Oh God, that sounds like an awful mirror.
Yeah, it's
something.
It was kind of funny because it really comes
4
down
Doom
to
Bolts in one turn. There's too many Doom Bolts in any game of 40k.
Magnus can't blank the Doom Bolts and he has no field of pain. So that's really, it comes down to like my first mirror match. The hilarious thing also was the fact that we showed up and we had the exact same lists as well. We're both running like right down the line. It's like, I have 2 Mutalisks and yeah, I threw a Forge Fiend in there as well. And we're just kind of laughing like, how the hell did we match up against each other out of this many people? And we literally also, we didn't talk pre-game or give anything away to each other, but then you could tell as the game was going on, we're looking at each other like, yeah, I know what you're doing. And he's like, yeah, I know what you're doing too. And Magnus lived the whole game. Like neither of our Magnuses took any damage at all. And I think he eked me out by like 3 points at the end. Fast forward like 2 games later, I get my second mirror match.
Oh, God.
And unfortunately, that opponent had never played the mirror match before, and
you're just there fresh off the
we're kind of talking
fresh off of it. Yeah.
We're talking pre-game, and like yeah, I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen here, and he loses his Magnus, and then once he takes Magnus off the table, it like dawns on him like, oh crap, you have Magnus, and I don't have Magnus, and it's yeah, this is bad for you.
Yeah. Dara, don't worry. Bladius in the chat says T's thousands of players can't all be good because I play them.
Nice. I mean, I would just say, like, in general, like, they probably have. I mean, I haven't really looked at the stats, but I imagine the T-Suns population has a much more concentrated, like, elo level or like skill level in general, I would say.
I'm really curious about that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting one to look at because
I would argue the same. I mean, popularity-wise, I think it's Death Guard World Eaters T-Suns. I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I think
a starter box army is always going to be like way more up there.
There's definitely a much bigger skill disparity in Death Guard player base, then it's like Dara said, when you come across, and it's weird, but you do it, when you come across factions that are not meta and quite, like if I came across a Gene Steel Cult player now, I'm like, this is going to be one of two ways. One, he's playing the army he likes and he doesn't give a shit if he loses and he's going to be bad. Or two, this man is an actual god.
Oh yeah, dude, like I played at Coventry. I played one of the, I think it was like Mind Goblins, one of those teams in the UK anyway, and he was on GSC. I hadn't played them in 10th edition, and man, it was so rough. Like I was just like, I don't know what's gonna happen here, and I basically got tabled in like 2 turns. It was just like, gosh, that was really really rough, and I wasn't like, I'm gonna go back and practice that game and work it out because I'm like, I've had my GSC game of 10th edition. I'll see you boys in 11th. You know, like I'm just not gonna see them again. But yeah, it's T-Suns I think is like maybe a less extreme version of that. But yeah, World Leaders and Deck Guard are like both quite popular, I would say. Like World Leaders just have that natural attraction of like all the people who play 40k and just want to run forward with a big axe. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, here's the faction for you. And then Deck Guard is like, they're just super popular because like wide range models are cool. We're a starter box.
One of the weird things, Dara, as well, and I think if a player plays the army like they have it in their head, I think if a 1,000 Sun player does that, it actually ends up working for them. If they do it as a world leader, you get tabled in record time because you just unga-bungered. And if you actually believe Death Guard is as durable as you read in the book, you're going to get a rude awakening.
Oh, it's going to be rough. Yeah, just like walking forward being like, I can take anything, and then you like melt to bolters. Like, oh dear.
It's like, I don't need rhinos. Rhinos are lame.
Yeah. But the problem is that like buy-in for the T-Suns to like play them how you think they should be played is already really high because you have to understand how you think they should be played, and that's already very difficult compared to like the single brain cell like kind of mindset of World Leaders where it's just like, I think I know how to run. Like I can do that.
I always say you can.
I mean, there's still some.
Go on, mate. Go on.
I was just gonna say there's still some. You know, it always amazes me just how, with our army, the amount of tricks we have and the toolbox we have, and with like the Cabal rituals, there's some really really interesting things that I'm seeing that are just, there's still things we're pulling out. Case in point, one of the sneaky things that I've seen we can do lately is you take away armor saves during the charge phase because it's start of the phase, so you can have something like Aramon's Rubric Squad sitting there, and you're coming in and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to charge you, you know, I'm good to go. And then all of a sudden you go, okay, start of the charge phase. I take your armor save away on whatever you're hitting with, Space Wolves or something that's about to hit you. And then now you don't have any armor saves, and I've got a bunch of flamers. So do you then charge? Do you not charge?
Oh, that's awful. Grim.
There's little things like that are just buried in the game still. I still think there's more.
It's really cool though when you like unlock that little piece, you know, that, and especially like because it's just an index, right? Which I think also drives people to find more stuff. Like when there's more options, you don't look as hard for the tricks as when there's fewer options. I just think it's like quite cool that stuff like that still comes out. But that is a terrifying tech piece.
That is not.
It takes some commitment to the army too. Like you have to be willing to, like, especially with Thousand Suns, you have to sit and practice and, you know, study it and then keep practicing, and you get to learn all these little interactions with it. Whereas if you kind of are like, okay, it's my flavor for the next 3 months or so, and I play a couple tournaments, you'll get the basics, but you'll miss out on some of these higher level, you know.
Yeah, there's like depth to all of them, right?
So rewarding.
Yeah, like I think one of my favorite ones was like Aiden's Plague Boss with the 2 sorcerers hanging at the top of a rhino. Like this is like the most cursed thing I've seen in all of 10th edition, but like I'm so here for it at the same time. You know, it was just like, and that was like peak diving into the index, finding something that is just like a ridiculous amount of synergy, but it works really well. And I'm like, yep, cool, here for it. Like that is awesome. So yeah, I think it's like, it sort of speaks to maybe our dedication, like the 3 of us, like diving deep into that faction. You're not going to find that stuff if you're just like, you know, meta butterfly bouncing into a different army every other month. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see.
What I appreciate about the dedicated players who stick with it, because you, even when your army is like we could say right now, World Eaters is probably in the worst state out of 3 of us, but you still find ways to make it work because it's the army you love. You're going to find all the tricks you can. You're going to use the Jackal bullshit. Because I know you love Jackals, Darren.
If my combat patrol was 30 Jackals, I would be so much more up for it. But yeah.
So in the chat, we've got James Wilson, who is a local custodian players to me, and he says, I hope you all remain in your index for as long as possible.
I ain't stressed.
I do feel sorry
Your
for you,
codex
James.
was amazing. I'm like, that's like
I don't-
50-50 chance that the combat codex is going to be okay.
So good segue there. We'll talk about going forward. So what we'll do before we talk about the meta change we expect with the two new codexes, let's have a quick. So each of you, if you could give us like maybe 2 things you would think or expect to go up in points the most in your book, 2 things you would hope to come down in points, and then maybe if there's a rule change you think you need. Again, if you don't think you need any, you don't have to say it for your specific army. So again, we'll go Thousand Suns first. Mr. Sorcerer, what would you like to see come down in points? What would you expect to see go up in points, if any?
So for Thousand Suns, that's a tough question because I would like to see the Scarab Occults come back to where they were to start the edition. They changed Dev Wounds so much that now mechanic for them, I think, doesn't necessarily warrant their points being pushed as high as they were. And it just kind of opens up the build variety a little bit more.
How many points out of curiosity is a Scarab?
I want to say they're like 41 or 42, something like that. If I'm,
Oh
I haven't looked
my
at it in a while,
God,
but they've
horrendous.
Death Shroud.
they went up. Yeah, it's easily a 400 for 10 man. You're easily close to 500 points because you have to add the sorcerer in as well because you're not going to go in on that. Yeah, you're up there with them, and it hurts.
And I thought my Terminators were expensive, but wow, that is. And like they have a more, am I correct in saying they have a more or less non-functional datasheet ability? Like it doesn't really work that well anymore, or?
No, actually, their rule is actually really great. Their built-in rule is if you target them with basically a weapon that's stronger than their toughness, it gets -1 to wound.
Oh, they have that thing.
So
okay,
you're
I'm
never
mixing up with
wounding them
something
on
else.
2s.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you've got
good.
bonuses to wound, you're never wounding them on 2s, which is pretty nice.
Does that require
Generally
a character,
speaking,
though?
no, that's the unit. The character that comes with them, gives them lethal hits.
Okay.
And then he will also give out, it's kind of a useless ability, really, but he gives out the whole army gets reroll 1s to hit against a single target. So if you had a lot of stuff that your rubrics already have it, so it's just redundant and not needed.
I had that actually happen to me in a game where there was like the Thousand Suns Demon Prince who can like choose to give one of the squads like precision for a turn, and I just had them like hose Invocatus in turn 1 when he was attached to the 8-band, and I was just like,
I didn't even know that
what?
was a thing.
Yeah.
What just happened?
He's being taken as well because he gives stealth to everything around him.
Yeah.
So in certain matchups that can be kind of valuable.
He's
but
actually really
precision is
cool.
pretty nice.
I like that guy a lot, the T-Suns Demon Prince.
So I think Magnus will probably go up.
You reckon?
Because it's the squeaky wheel. Everybody knows he's good. Everybody admits that I'd take him if you raise the points. So, like, please stop saying that we'll take them if they raise the points. Just argue not to raise the points and hope that doesn't happen. But I wouldn't be shocked if it does. But outside of that, I think Thousand Suns are in a point where point reductions or point changes aren't going to solve some of the problems we have.
Yeah.
We need like profile reboots on things. We've already talked about defilers and the demon engines, the vehicles, all that kind of stuff. Like in Thousand Suns, it's comical when you compare stuff like the Hellbrute to the CSM Hellbrute or the Predator to the CSM Predator, and you just start seeing the built-in rules that they have or the things that work with it and synergize with it in that army versus ours where it's pretty awful. Like they get no benefit really from the other stuff other than maybe the take your armor save away, but everything else gets that too. So
yeah,
I don't know, but that's kind of where I think they're at. I just don't think points are going to really change the army all that much.
Yeah, I think because the problem is, and few people have said it. What I've heard is that you have the opposite problem I have as Death Guard, where your data sheets are stacked. They are scary data sheets. So there's a certain flaw that you just can't make them cheaper. Then otherwise the army becomes broken. But at the same time, it's keeping you at that point where, especially because you have Cabal points generated, you are like the list is at the moment basically Magnus, enough root marines to keep your characters safe and buff them and make them, and they do all the work, and then you have 400 points to play with, and that's about it. And there's not much room for you to play around with. Obviously, the most tech you have at the moment is the introduction of a 20-man Zangor brick, which is not like it's like
which
100 points.
which I'm getting into right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really loving that, especially when you put the crystal
Yeah.
on it and you can teleport them up into people's faces and do
Stop.
block
Yeah.
and all sorts of fun stuff.
It's a Zeus jackal.
I love it. Oh, it's exactly what I want. Embrace the mortality. Let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think that at a certain point, they need a rework, not because I want to say they're broken, but because I feel like the power needs to be distributed a bit more flatly along the units that you have.
Well, I think that's like a big problem with Magnus, right? Is like that
Yeah.
distribution of power. It's like so heavily concentrated on his data sheet. Like he does so much. If you parse that out a little bit better across the army, like maybe give some of his buffs to maybe more redundant units like the Hellbrood, or like, you know, change up the Demon Prince a little bit, I think it functions a lot better. And it isn't a question of like, I have to take Magnus, but obviously you don't dilute him so much that he becomes not takeable, because it is really cool that like for the first time since I've started playing Comp 40k, that Magnus is actually a really viable piece on the tabletop. Normally it's like, haha, you brought the big red chicken, now you lose. But like, I'm kind of like here in a way for like being terrified of Magnus. But if it's stymieing the growth of the T-Sun's like, you know, variety, then that is a problem as well, I would say.
Yeah,
I think you're spot on. The Magnus is probably the best internally balanced he's been in all the other editions that we've had. And it's generally been, if you took him, he was a liability. And they only just started realizing like how to start to adjust that towards like 9th edition, where you could put him in reserves or deep strike him, that kind of stuff. So at least in this edition, you know, he's a centerpiece. Everybody brings him. They know he's a lot of points. He's 440 points right now. So you know he's a lot of points in an investment, but people are okay with that if you're getting the return on that investment that you put in there. Scarab Occult Terminator is an example where you're not getting that return. It's just
they're
way
crazy
too many points on
expensive for,
something.
like,
yeah,
it's a weird one.
And every unit you're taking right now with our current setup, with our core army rule, is a unit that doesn't generate Cabal points or interact somehow with the Cabal points. Is something that is taking away from that mechanic. So unless you have something on those units that does that or contributes to it, then, you know, I just don't see the profiles that they have right now working out. I mean, you were talking about reducing the cost of the units. Look what they did with the Land Raider in the past edition, where they kept reducing the costs of them and still wasn't getting taken. And they eventually, I think, just got to the point where they realized, all right, there's a wholesale reboot needed on this stuff, because nobody's taking Land Raiders. They're not serving the person. At least in this edition, you start to see them more. The toughness increase on them really helped a lot.
Yeah,
And,
they're a funny one,
know,
the old Land Raider.
we still have the problem of, okay, great, we can take Land Raiders, but what are we putting in a Land Raider?
Yeah, I think the World Leader's problem with the Raider is just like we run faster than it.
Yeah.
So assault ramp is cute, but like I can outpace the assault ramp. So
I don't have
doesn't
time
matter.
for Land Raiders. I'm assaulting already.
I was so hype on them. I ran like one at the start of the edition. I was like, this is like the vibe. And it very swiftly was not the vibe, I would say.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dara, what would you like to see go down in points? What would you like to see go up? Well, expect to see go up in points?
Yeah, I think it's like pretty simple for world leaders. I think Berserkers could do it coming down to 90 points for 5. At 100, they are very expensive for what should be a primo melee army that is only AP1 on the charge. It's a little bit rough, especially when only having 2 attachable characters and one of them being Karn and one of them being Mo. So I'd like to see them come down to 90, and then I think I would really like to see Terminators come down, because they're not quite as expensive as Scarab Occult. They're 39 points a model, but they have no attachable characters, and they have a data sheet ability, which is like the really bad one, which requires like their own unit to die before they start getting buffed. It's like +1 to hit when they've lost guys, and +1 to wound when they're below half strength. So it's like super bad. And they're more expensive than Exalted 8 Band, which is really bad. So if they dropped in points, I think it could be cool, because it would open up a different archetype for world leaders in general, where it isn't just like we love speed. It's kind of like, okay, maybe we love durability as well, which is really fun. And they have a 4+ invuln, so I wouldn't have to bring the Demon Prince in every single list. So that would be nice. So I'd like to see them come down. I'm not sure to what, maybe like 35 points a model would be quite nice. And in terms of things going up, I've called it for every balanced dataslate, and it's never happened. But I do think Angron is going to go up this time because he hasn't gone up yet, and everyone's still taking him. And GW can't work out for some reason what the problem with World Eaters is. I think it's time they started looking at Angron. So I expect him to go up, and I'm not really sure if anything else will go up because pretty much our entire army increased in the last balanced dataslate. So there isn't really much scope to make things more expensive. Maybe they just up the Helldrake again because, like, why
No
not?
one's
Just make
taking it
sure that
anyway.
it's definitely
Yeah,
gone.
make sure the
Make sure
aircraft
that
are
it's
dead.
gone. Yeah. Well, I suppose they might up the Forge Fiend because it's pretty cheap at the minute. But I don't know. I could see those as being the changes.
It's interesting too because they can adjust the points per codex. So, like, they could raise them in CSM, and that would make sense because dark packs are ridiculous. But
Yeah.
in our armies, I don't know that it's ridiculous. It's just cheap and.
Well, we don't have
but,
dev
I mean,
wounds
it's like
on our Forge Fiends, and they do. Like,
Yep,
I think there's like
we
a
don't. Yeah.
70-something point difference between the World Leaders and the CSM Forge Fiend currently. Like, our ones are cheap. But
What, are they like 130, 135, something like that?
140, I think, for the World Leaders one, which is pretty good.
It sounds like the same with T-Suns. Yeah.
Yeah, it has a cool rule where it like forces battle shock when it shoots people, but it's not the weird one where it's like you pick one unit that you shot. You can actually split fire its guns across 3 units and battle shock all of them, which was really good into the Custodes game because if you battle shocked any of those units before you charge them, it was pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. In terms of like actual rules changes, I don't really know if we would see any. I would like to see Angron get that rules change that I was saying. I think that would be pretty nice. And the only other thing, which I think would do an awful lot for our army in terms of viability, is like, you know how in Sons of Sanguinius they gave them the extra strength on the charge?
Yeah.
If they did that for us, but gave us an extra AP instead of strength. Because like, our army suffers so much from being low AP across the board. Like, your 8-band and Exalted 8-band are AP2. Whereas, like, you have Plague Marines going up to AP4 functionally, which is like, these things are not the same. You know? So I would like to see that. That might be a bit strong, but I expect we'll only get light points touches. Probably a lot of stuff comes down for us. But yeah, I'm not really thinking too much for World Leaders. It's more like how the wider meta changes is what's going to be really advantageous for us. I don't think it's like our own stuff functionally changing that much. We might get like 50 to 100 points in our list. That's what I'm expecting. But it's like, okay, what changes for everyone else? And then where do we sit after that?
Oh, that's nice. Fair play. As for the Death Guard side, points I'd like to see come down. I know everyone's probably going to expect me to say Blightlord Terminators, but I'll be honest, there is a limit to how cheap you can make Terminators, and they will still suck. They don't have a role. They're outshone by Death Shroud in terms of durability and output. And they have 1 OC, so they don't really hold objectives very well because someone just comes and stands on it next to you instead of on it. You have lethal hit bolters and strength 5 AP2 1 damage melee weapons. Like, it's a giant nothing burger. It exists. It's like the cheapest Terminators in the game by far, like free, like 32 points a model. There's like 320.
Oh wow,
like
that is cheap.
10-man toughness.
Well, I mean, it's like you said though, they don't do anything.
Yeah, they literally
right?
don't do anything. They just they exist. And that again, I think that's one of those where you don't fix in that unit with points. I mean, don't get me wrong, everything can technically become competitive with points, but what I mean is like you get into a point where it's not, you're not paying for it because it's a good unit. You're paying for it because it's an absurd like stat line for the points, which is not what you want to have because that's just not a healthy game. That needs a rules change, so I don't think that's going to work. If anything was to get a points drop, I'd like to see Blight Haulers probably. Aesthetic Blight Haulers should probably go on to 90, the same as Bloat Drones. They are worse than Bloat Drones in most instances, and they're more expensive. So I'd like to see them go down. We kind of lack anti-tank anyway. Good anti-tank that isn't melee anyway. They're our best anti-tank, and really it's just a guy with a multi-melter and a missile launcher, which isn't like, you know, it's not exactly setting the world on fire. And it has +1 to wound versus vehicles, but not monsters, which is super annoying. It's like, it doesn't do anything against Tyranids. But so I expect to see them come down. If anything was to go up points-wise, please don't touch my Plague Burst Crawler. But for us, probably Predator. I reckon the Predator could go up 10 points. Just because they kind of appearing everywhere at the moment, Predators. It's just a really good shooting platform. We can give it an extra AP with the Contagions. which can get them to absurd levels. But they're not horrendously like offensive. I don't feel like anyone's sitting there going, "Oh, damn predators, they're so broken."
Like, would you say they're actually like a problem, or they're just efficient in your index?
I think
Because like
it's-
I don't know if they're that much of a problem.
Yeah, I think they're just efficient, but they are popping up everywhere. And like GW likes to just like sometimes they're just like, right, we got to shoot something, boys. What's showing up in
Yeah.
most of us? There you go, bang. So it could be.
I feel like they might
Hate
shoot
to see-
typhus though.
Yeah. Oh, typhus. Yeah.
The Chaos Space Marine ones, I think, are probably a problem
Oh yeah.
at their point level for what they get. That
How
might
do you?
need a
I
little
don't
bit of a
understand
bump
how
there.
you balance that book because, like, it's so hard to balance something when you can give something like sustained on 5s because
Yeah.
it's kind of like the Votan problem.
lethal on 5s.
Yeah, it's like when I play Votan, it's like this is a Sagittor, and it's like it can land no hits or it can land 8 hits with its last cannon. I don't know. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. And like,
I
I've
mean,
had
it's
games where it
like-
misses and games where it one shots a Land Raider, and you're like, cool, balance.
Stuff like that like bugs me. It's like CSM and Votan are good examples where it's just like there's so much layers and stacked stuff that like the data sheet that you're looking at is almost never what is actually functioning in the game.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, how you balance stuff like that is incredibly difficult. And I don't know, CSM's got me worried, man. Like that book
Yeah.
is gonna be so scary in my
Eight
opinion. I
detachments.
love CSM, like they're my boys, but like, oh boy, am I not ready for uppy downy obliterators in the Alpha Legion detachment because that's gonna suck
Yeah.
real
Hey, that's my
bad.
other army.
Yeah. It's gonna be my other army soon, and everyone else's.
Well, on Death Guard again. Do I misremember something? Like, did they in the early part of 10th? Did they mess around with Piper's Crawler points? And have they already adjusted it a couple times?
Yeah,
So, like,
so-
if they adjusted,
We started
Again,
at
it would be
175. We went down to 160. Now we're up to 180 again. So we're already the most expensive they've ever been. I hope we don't get another nerf because guards doing quite well at the moment. They're just like, it's that indirect keyword, rather than being like, no, it's the indirect keyword with the heavy keyword, with the ignores cover, with the +1 to hit for just existing. That's kind of problematic. The playbook
Yeah,
scroller
like
just-
let's be real. Basilisk hitting on 2s is not the same as the PBC hitting on 4s. You know, it's just not quite it.
So I hope
it was like they
blank it.
actually did the things they needed to do to try and adjust indirect, but then just kind of like halfway through said, "All right, screw it. You can have it all back again."
I will never understand the absolute genius that decided to put an indirect keyword and a heavy keyword on the same weapon. Like,
Look
what-
at,
like,
I mean,
what
look at
happened?
Eldar.
Yeah.
Eldar with their support weapons, they have indirect, heavy, and dev wounds on something that they can just automatically put a 6 on. So I've got 3 of these things sitting there to the deployment zone covering a 24-inch range that is just like, all right, I mean, go to the middle. It's whatever goes there is going to die.
It is metal, but I think they're the point changes I'd probably expect for Death Guard, if any. Again, I think Death Guard's probably in a position where we probably need the least changes out of all 3 armies here. Typhus could probably go up because Typhus is absurd at 80 points. But away from our specific armies, having obviously a little estimate into what we're expecting to see nerfed meta-wise, I'm not asking you to tell me what points a Wraith's going to be, but obviously I expect that we can... I'll do some questions in the chat first, very quickly. Which army of you 3 has the best and worst Prince rules? I'm just going to say, I'm out of this race. Mine is the worst by
Let's
far.
fucking go.
It's-
No one's coming close to my princes, right?
So I am the
They're
most trash
so
one.
strong.
Because I am
Yeah.
currently sat on a 6-up Feel No Pain aura, which does literally nothing. So I resign myself from the election of best.
What does your
demon
wing
prince.
prince do, actually?
My
Does
wing
he, do you,
Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
Are you ready for this? Okay. I know him that well. I have to actually look him up. That's how good he is.
I know ours uppy downies. Our winged
Uh-oh.
one, which can be,
That's
Yeah.
cool.
yeah. Especially
wing
when you
one,
need
right?
line of sight on something. Yeah.
Okay.
Wing one does that, and then the other one doesn't precision. So
Yeah.
that is pretty good. They're just expensive, and there's no support for them for close combat. We literally have 0 close combat stratagems. So
That's pretty rough.
You ready, Dara?
Hit me with it, bro.
Each time this model enters a charge move, select an enemy unit within engagement range. That unit must take a battle shock test.
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
On the bright side, the actual other rule I get is devastating wounds on the charge, but
Oh, you
it's-
get like 2 of my prince rules but like
I
on
have
the one
6
prince.
attacks at strength 8.
Yeah.
That's
also-
really the point where they're struggling, is the number of attacks or the output of the attacks that they have.
I think it's
The
like
strength.
Yeah, I think it's probably for them. It's probably the strength and damage. I think the number of the attacks is okay, but it's a real low strength, and flat damage 3 is like fine. But it would be nice if it was like maybe D3 plus 1 or something. I don't know.
Also, he's 200 points in an index that's as cheap as mine. That is criminal. I am never taking him.
Yeah,
So-
it's real bad.
So,
like
yeah.
I ain't gonna lie.
So
To be fair,
it's between you two for the best demon
to be
prince.
fair, the
I
World
don't mean
Leader's
to
Wing
make this-
Prince it also battle shocks when he charges in. And he has a pretty funny rule where you pick a target at the start of the game and you reroll everything against that target. But if that target isn't dead at the end of the game, the prince dies.
That's quite
That
funny.
almost lost me a game
That is
before when my
awesome.
opponent took Assassinate. And he died at the end of the game and I won by 2 points when I could have won by 7. That did not feel great.
Whoever wrote that, hands off. Heads
Yeah.
off, dude. That's an awesome rule for a demon prince.
Yeah, it's like Oath of Moment. I think it's actually called Oath to Corn, and it's like just cursed Oath of Moment, where it's like I gotta do this thing because if I don't, I'm in big trouble. So he's like he's a choice. I think he's actually like quite popular in World Leader lists anyway because like a Demon Prince rapid ingressing with wings, like when you've got Angron running around, is a problem. And it really helps that we have 2 amazing enhancements that you can put on the Prince. One of them halves all damage, which is really powerful. And the other one is the Berserker Glaive, which you normally see on the Master of Executions, which is very good on a Demon Prince as well. But the Foot Prince is where the money's at because he just gives out a 5-up invul Nora, and it goes to a 4-up if you already have an invul. He does Dev Wounds on the charge, he is T10, and you put the half damage stratagem on him, and he just doesn't move unless you get double Doom Bolted, in which case he is gone.
And what do we have on the 1000 side? So you got your Uppy Downy boy. What about your footprints?
So the Uppy Downy boy is actually who I took to LVO, and
Okay.
the funny thing is it pretty much does what you were hoping for. So I can put the Arcane Vortex on it, which would normally go on the Infernal Master. And what it does is it increases the damage of a psychic weapon they contain, or they have, or increases the damage of psychic weapons by 1. Sword happens to be psychic in our army, so now it goes to a damage for psychic attack, and on top of that, our psychic attacks get dev wounds from our detachment. So now I've got devastating wounds with it. So it looks really good on paper, but then when you put it into stuff, the strength on it really hurts, and we have no rerolls. Like, there's no rerolls for the Demon Prince, so you pretty much are getting what you get in combat. So it can be very swingy depending on what gets through and what you roll. That's probably the lesser play. I think more people are taking the Foot Demon Prince right now, which gives precision and stealth. And from what I haven't been taking it, but from what I understand, the logic is the stealth is what people are really taking it for, to help with durability on stuff.
Until
We
you run into
otherwise
the
don't
World
really
Leaders
have a lot
game
of-
and he just becomes a redundant piece, right? Just kind of rough.
I mean, I'm not big on it because one of my other armies is Raven Guard, and they have the same. I play them with the Vanguard Spearhead, where it's -1 to hit outside of it, and it's not as great as it sounds. It just does not give you the durability. Plus, the cover rule on that is really weak because you already have cover in 90% of the situation. So,
I think it's like very different to, because it doesn't sound that different to the World Leaders Demon Prince on foot, who gives you that invul Nora, but it feels so different, right? Because like when you've got Berserkers running around with a 5-up and you can push it to a 4 when you go to ground, or like you castle a ton of 8-bound variants around him who all are now rocking a 4-up and then a Feel No Pain, it just hits so different. And in the world where Custodes were that dominant force, he was just such a great tech piece. I think he's still going to be amazing. But I think it's fair to say that like all our Demon Princes are super expensive, right? You know, it's really pricey unit.
It's probably.
I can see them bringing all the Demon Princes across the board down 10 points.
Would be nice.
You know, I can see something like that.
Yeah, bring down mine 50, but I'm taking it.
They come down like in a way that like represents how cheap or expensive the rest of the faction is. So the Death Guard one will be like 10 points, and then all the rest of them will be normal points.
Okay, so we'll let chat decide then. There are entries for the best demon prince. It's definitely not mine. That's all I know for sure. It's definitely not mine. So then we got Lazy DM with a $5 donation. What are the armies you love and hate the most playing against? Not for the auto win and lose factor, but because you know it will be fun or it won't be fun. So I don't like personally playing against. I really don't like playing against guard. And I just it was fun when it was like killing all the guardsmen. I at least got to enjoy that whilst being indirected. But now it feels really bad when I like kill like 20 guys when they just go up reinforcements. And then they get 20 guys that just killed just back anyway. So it's like, cool, I literally do nothing while I'm being indirected off the board. And again, it's because I sit there and like to get my bonuses on indirect, I have to get a unit within contagion range, then spend a command point for Boil Blight, or I have to bring my Primarch. I'll get a Lord of Villains to get line of sight. They literally just stand still and go, yeah, they'll order them to have +1 to hit. And then it's like, okay, cool. And it's better AP, it's better damage. And I just get, like, blown up instantly. And it's like, it's a bit meh. Especially when the Basilisk starts tagging you -2 to move, because I only move, like, 4. It's like, great, now I move 2. And it's just like, it's a matchup I've got to hope brought Mortarion. As for matchups I really enjoy playing, I weirdly do enjoy the World Eaters matchup. It is brutal, because even though I have like fights first, I have the Flamers, I can only overwatch 1 unit a turn, and like there's a scary moment against World Eaters where when I get the pairing and it's turn 1, and if it's his turn 1 and he scouts forward and runs at me, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a bloodbath, but I'll come out on top. Then there's the other game where he moves into a building. I'm like, oh no, he can stage.
It's happening.
And that's when I know it's going to be a much tougher game. But it's always interesting and fun because at the end of the day, for a World Eater to damage you, he has to expose himself, which means trading is going to happen, stuff dies. And I enjoy those kind of matches where
it's interactive, right?
Yeah, it's interactive. Yeah. There's none of this like also no fire and fadey World Eater nonsense or anything like that.
Not yet. Wait for the Invocatus detachment.
Wait for the up and downy fire fade detachment.
Yeah. It's coming. I can sense it.
So go on, what about you guys?
You go first, Dave.
Okay. So in terms of my hated matchups, obviously Custodes is up there just because. All right, I'm gonna say some things that are gonna probably upset some Custodes fans.
This is no
slight against you guys. But
yes.
Custodes players always bother me. They always bother me because if you look at their stats, it's always like I'm always hitting on 2s. I'm re-rolling everything. I've got 2-up, 4-ups. I'm super durable, and it's like we do everything the best. Like we're the best dudes in the world, and yet somehow we run into issues where we start complaining about stuff being able to kill us. And it's like, it's so hard to kill Custodes. And then they give against us. Out of everybody else in the game, they give us an even worse battle where it's like, oh no, because you're playing psychic stuff, you get a 4-up Fume of Pain against everything. And, I get it. Their rules are changing. I'm complaining about where they are right now. But it's more just the general player base with Custodes that always tend to be like they have everything and then they just tend to be upset about having everything because it's not invincible.
Me and Dara like to rag on that exact point where it's like Custodes players, like they're like, I have to play this game with only 25 models. I have to use my expertise and strategy to win the game. And me and Dara are like, mate, you stood on 3 objectives and rolled 4-ups. It's like...
Yeah,
it's like, well, knights have to play with what, 10 models, something like that.
At most,
Is that how it works? The least models, the more large brain you are.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's a tough army to play into. I think I can't say I disagree with what David said there. Really, to be honest, it can be tough sometimes just standing there listening to them complain about why their models are dying when I'm like, I just made the correct play and you didn't. I'm sorry.
You see, I because I played Death Guy, I hit that wall of them complaining, and now I just laugh at them while I drown them in like 8d6 anti-infantry flamers on their invul, and they're like, what, you wounded me on 2s? I'm like, yeah. He's like, but I'm toughest, don't care. But you got Mortarion, they're like, well, I'm -1 to wound and -1. No, you're not.
I love that. They have 2-up saves. Well, okay, make 50 of them.
Yeah.
Nope, you have a free up save. -1 save contagion.
Well, there you go.
It's like, it's quite funny.
Yeah,
I agree.
Custodies are up there. Guard is probably for us one of the other ones I hate, and this might be more my personal experience showing through because there's a local guy here in Texas with the meta that I play in, and he and I always run into each other at majors. Like it's almost guaranteed once a year. We have great games. He's an awesome dude. I love playing the games with him. But every game is when we do face off, he decided to bring his guard and he decided to bring like 10 indirect, ridiculous like basilisk, mana cores, whatever else he had. And I'm just not. I played that tournament trying to dodge that matchup, but then I just don't dodge it, and it's always him that I run into. But in general, guard, just the ability to just sit back with all their indirect and just kind of like send their sentinels forward and send their bodies forward and everything that's annoying to play into. I can't deep strike because you screen me out. I can't really get up the table because now you're just going to blast me with your Lehman Russes that you have, and that matchup gets to be pretty tough to play into. Although I do prefer some of the matchups where they don't have the indirect. It's a little bit of a more fun game.
Yeah.
And then the third one is Sisters, because I think Sisters trades extremely well into almost everybody. They love trading stuff out. The stuff they send forward is, really annoying and really scary. And you've got exorcists in the back with indirect as well. Maybe I just hate indirect. I don't know.
And then
my favorite pattern.
I hate indirect. I use indirect. Mine's not as good as like Exorcist or anything like that, but I get it. Indirect is an issue. It's not fun to face because it's again the whole fun. As me and Dara said before, it's interaction, and interaction should be I want to do X thing, so I must expose X thing to do this, and then Y thing can react to that. And indirect just goes no, I don't. I just sit here and do it.
At least I'll take the meta right now because at least it's better than the meta we had with all the planes flying around, all the elf planes and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was even worse. But
yeah,
good matches. I love playing Space Wolves. I don't care whether the rules are imbalanced and we get run over. I just love the matchup because I just hate Space Wolves and I love playing into them and just seeing how much I can kill them.
Yeah. Fair.
I don't remember what the other one was. Demons right now tend to be pretty good for T-Suns because they don't have a lot against Devloons, and Devloons go burr.
Devloons do go burr. I can imagine him now
and
sat
outside
on an objective against Space Wolves, and he's like, I win the game by 5 points for standing this objective, but Bjorn's on 1 HP behind a wall, and he's just like itching his arm like, don't do it.
Magnus going in being like, round 3, I'll get him this time.
The only other thing would be Space Marines in general, just across the board. I love just killing Space Marines. I mean, when my original Space Marine army was Minotaurs, and I picked them because they liked killing other Space Marines, but they dropped support for them, and that I'm sad now. But all right, I've talked long enough about my matchups. How about yours?
Go on, Dara.
I think, it's no great surprise that my least favorite matchup is Votann. I think I make that quite publicly known on a regular basis. I just really hate the faction. Its lore. I know you can hold it up there. It's not going to change my mind. I love you, Aiden, but I hate your choices. I just hate the lore. I hate how the army plays on the tabletop. I must say that the trend was broken at Manchester. I played this guy Doug who was on Votann. He was so chill and really nice, but most of the Votann people I've played have not been that. It's I think the way I put it before was they will complain about how bad their rules are as they are tabling you in the same turn. It's kind of like how Tau players used to do it sometimes, right? It's just, it doesn't feel great. I don't like that, the thing we were talking about earlier with the disparity of what's on their data sheet versus what they're actually doing on the table is so wildly different. And you can imagine for an army like World Eaters, which has a super low unit count and normally 3 very important units who you really need to make sure your game plan works, that in the judgment token mechanic, that is really bad. It's just oh gosh, I wonder where your judgment tokens are going to go in the first round. It's oh, what a surprise, you picked Angron, the Exalted 8-band, and the other Exalted 8-band is like literally the Squidward meme of like daring today, aren't we?
If we ever play Dara, I'll put it on you Jackals because I hate you Jackals. So I'll be like,
Most people put one on the Jackals as well because then they
Yeah,
kill
free
them
command
really
points.
quickly and get all the command points, which I'm just like, why does that happen? But okay. So yeah, I don't really enjoy them. But games that I really do enjoy playing into is like it's kind of like regardless of faction, but another player who is as good at me on a melee army is like so fun. Um, because it plays like no other game of 40k. I mean, Aiden, you saw Manchester, my mirror match in the last game was
Jesus
just like the most
Christ.
chaotic thing ever. Like that's amazing because you just got to play a really weird game of 40k. Blood Angels as well. Like if you've got a good Blood Angels player, good Orcs player, few and far between, but I've heard they do exist. And yeah, that's like kind of the main ones, which I'm like, it's going to be a fun game. Obviously, the mirror match is just like crazy good. But like I don't really have a problem playing against like most armies. Tau, when they're really oppressive, is really not fun for world leaders, and
Yeah.
Votan have historically been not that fun for world leaders either. Um, so yeah, basically gunline armies just, shockingly are problematic. Guard is like not really such a big deal because we kind of
Breaking
just have the
news:
speed.
melee player hates gunline player.
Yeah, right. I know. Guard is normally fine because we have the speed to just be like, we touch the indirect, and then the indirect dies. But yeah, I don't know. Just like it's pretty simple, but axe player likes to fight other axes and hates guns. Like shocker.
That's fair. That's fair. And then another question: if Emperor's Children do get released this edition, what do you think would be some good rules for them to keep the rock paper scissors balance of the chaos, and who would counter them best? So I think in my head, Emperor's Children sort of struck a. It's weird because where do they actually fall between us? Because I mean, like obviously we have you have Magic Man, you have Melee Man, you have Tough Man. What?
They're the closest to a gun line, I think. Yeah, I think so. Like they've got the Cacophony, they've got Noise Marines. They have like a lot of in the lore anyway. They have a lot of gun stuff, like gun demon engines, like gun titan noise things. I reckon they could be a weird like hybrid gun line that has a lot of counter combat punch built into it as well. Um, it wouldn't shock me if they got a detachment that its detachment rule was literally like the entire army gets fight first. Like that wouldn't surprise me, and that would be really rough. But I could definitely see it happening. I think just like because of how I imagine they will be built in terms of like filling a new niche that doesn't already exist for any of the current three. I think GW will build them to be more like range orientated, but they'll be super fast as well. They'll kind of be like what Tau wish they were, which is like a very hypermobile, good shooting army, I think.
That could be cool. That'd be interesting to see. Any thoughts, David?
I would just say, in my opinion, I'd kind of try to share. So in 40k, you have a lot of armies that rhyme. They don't share exactly the same rules, but if you were to put Eldar and Thousand Suns on the same table, you start to see a lot of similar mechanics that aren't exactly the same mechanic. And I kind of equate them a little bit to Dark Eldar in a way, very similar. And I kind of think that they would kind of behave kind of the same way, where they might have, maybe they get plus movement, or they get like +2 movement to everything. So like their rhinos are going 14 versus other stuff. And then they have, maybe something like combat drugs or something similar to combat drugs,
Yeah.
along that line, something along that line where they kind of operate a little bit more like as raiders kind of thing. And
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
That'd be cool. Awesome. So sort of come towards the end of this now. Meta coming up. Expected. We know what's happened to Custodes. They're pretty much, if the book stands as is, par some ludicrous points, which I don't think we're going to see. I think we can kind of all at this point write Custodes out of the matchup worry. I'm sorry, Custodes players, but like that is the possibly worst book I've seen in a long time. And I rag on Custodes, but I genuinely feel sorry for you. So I'm not too worried about Custodes. Orcs are looking interesting. Orcs looking actually quite powerful. I think we're all going to need a way to deal with Mega Knobs. Because having a feel no pain on Wardens for one phase
Hello,
is
new
obnoxious.
Wardens. Yeah.
How about 2 whole battle rounds?
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
I'm hoping that gets addressed fairly quickly, because the problem is, if you go out and buy 3 units of Mega Knobs, you are going to have players that are, let's say, your mid-table warriors, your 3-2s, your 2-3s. If they come across that army and they haven't got the skill level to sort of know how to beat it other ways, they're just going to get steamrolled, and it's going to be the worst experience of their life. It's not going to be fun, because I'm having to think outside of the box. I'm going to use playcasters to try and reduce them to 1-inch move, and then just basically ignore it until it wears off. All sorts of things. God knows, 1,000 Suns, you have some movement stuff you can do to try and keep them slowed down. Doombolt does help, but again, feel no pain is feel no pain. So it's like shooting custodians for you. Dara, I think you're playing the worst time against it.
Yeah, man, I'm stressed. I'm so stressed for it. I think it's the Mega Knobs one is not really the one I'm worried the most about, the Bully Boys. I think it's the Green Tide, because I'm just okay, one thing World Leaders probably actually can't do unless they skew hard into Berserker Horde is kill 120 boys and then kill another 50% of an army with what you've got left over, because if boys stay their current cost, it's gonna be that's gonna be the meta, right? It's just gonna be people throwing 120 boys plus, whatever else they decide they want to throw, and just being lol skill as they flood the board and say, I am very clever. It's actually, I really think a lot of Custodes players are gonna pivot to orcs because it's just it's almost as easy to play as before. There's just a lot more models. But functionally, it's the same thing where it's just yes, I have a 5-up invul and I reroll once. I'm that's actually pretty close to a 4-up invul. And I'm that attracts a certain type of person. But I think that is going to be quite difficult. I'm not really sure yet. I've been thinking a lot about it. And I can certainly write skew lists that play very well into the Green Tide, but they are super skewed and they will play very poorly into other armies. So trying to strike a balance between those is going to be the key thing. But I think where Custodes have fallen off as our biggest oppressor, I think Deck Guard and Orcs are primed to take the place as a really big problem for our army.
And I think obviously we can expect Necrons to get a bit of a slap as well.
Yeah, they're up there. They definitely are probably going to have some stuff done to them. I think with Thousand Suns, the thing that's kind of flying under the radar is that we have an ability on our Disc Exalteds that we can hand out. I think it's 18 inches, and we just roll a 2-up. Just starting the shooting phase, we just pick something visible. Halves movement, halves advance rolls, halves your charge rolls.
The anti-World Leader Frisbee is what we call it. It's just so annoying.
I'm seeing kind of the standard list now runs 2 of those guys, because if you fail one, you've got a backup. And that will be, for us, into something that's charging at us. That's our tool. That's the tool we start to bring, and that helps us. The rest of the meta, so if infantry becomes much heavier, I'm more of a contrarian type player. And I'm, I do dabble with Chaos Knights and Knights, and I think that becomes a really interesting play if you're just purely looking from a Chaos perspective in the meta. Because if everybody goes anti-infantry guns,
you rock up
what's good? Stuff that can't. You roll up with Chaos Knights and you just bring up a ton of Stalkers. I'm really big on Stalkers right now because they have indirect, have 12
Wait,
shot.
what's a Stalker? Is that the... Which one is
the
the
one
Stalker?
that no one's taking, that has the claw, the Gatling cannon, and the missile launcher on top.
So
you bring them, you get the indirect shots, you have tons of little AP1 shots, and you get, if nothing else is around it, you get +1 to wound. So if they just drop a unit and there's nothing else in their army 6 inches within it, they get +1 to wound against it, which can be really good. So, I mean, that's how I kind of think through the meta, is if it gets that slanted to something that nobody's ready for like that. But I think Thousand Suns will be able to adapt. But we've got such a deep toolkit on stuff with the units we do have that are good. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think we're definitely going to see the Unchained Orc book is probably going to become the next meta menace, I'd say. More than one detachment there is looking good. Bully Boys looks good. Green Hole looks good. Even Dread Mob potentially on I'd fear that
Dude,
more in
Dreadmob looks
America.
very good.
I think that's
Yeah,
more we
in
probably fear
America, yeah, 100%.
Because a
Yeah.
Stomper with +1 damage for all of its guns for 1 CP is that's a thing.
That is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
Like,
So
also, like, it's a very easy army to play because you just bring like 120 grots and stand them in front of a gun line and just say, haha, skill. And then it's like they have that thing. So this is like a pain point for me when it comes to designing the orcs, right? Where they're kind of like, aha, we've made the orcs ballistic skill 5. They hit really poorly. And then it's like, but they have tons of rerolls and loads of sustained and loads of lethal. And I'm like, so do they hit really poorly? Because it sounds like they actually don't,
Yeah.
and that's kind of I think what we're seeing again.
I literally just watched I was watching War Games Live the other day, and I literally watched the stream from the team event, and they had, I think it was Flash Gits, and they were getting charged by Invocatus. And I watched this, and the guy didn't know what the Flash Gits did, and they had full rerolls, and they had exploding, I think it was exploding lethal hits is what they had with full rerolls. And he overwatched Invocatus, and we did the math. It was like 40 shots, or went through it, and so he should average, like, I think it was something like he averages 7 on the first round rerolls, you get like another 7, so call it like 15 hits somewhere in there, but then it's lethal and sustained, so you're now pulling that, so now you've got 30 hits at that point, and it's kind of okay, and that's on Overwatch.
Yeah, we've argued about Overwatch sometimes before. It's an interesting thing. So I think if we see, hopefully we see Catan's kind of take a back seat for a bit. the 18 Wraithless, please, can you go out of the meta? You're not fun. It's not necessarily, you can beat it, but it's just miserable. But the one thing we could say about Orcs, because I do think Orcs are becoming stronger and become part of the meta, is at least you generally get to kill Orcs. Like 150 boys, like you generally like tends to have more fun versus Orcs than say like 18 Wraiths, where stuff just refuses to die. So I'm hoping, I do think the Orc Codex is incredible flavor wise and an incredible book. It's so coolly written. I think
it's an amazing book. Yeah, it's such fantastic. A good codex.
It just needs a few balance passes, which is, normal. It's a standard thing. I would rather a book come out and be interesting and fun rather than Custodes, which again, the problem's not just rules, it just doesn't look that fun to play either. I don't think Custodes are fun anyway, but it's to each their own. So I reckon, but yeah, I don't reckon there's going to be much massive boogeymen outside of Thingy. Again, it totally depends what happens. T-Suns could become incredibly scary if Thingy, but again, the one thing that kind of keeps T-Suns in place is the skill floor. And I think if you compare, as Dara said there, when you have the ability to put like 18 Meganobs or just load of boys, compared to learning the intricacies of Thousand Suns, the average meta butterfly is probably going to take the easier option. But those dedicated to T-Suns are probably going to be in a pretty good spot, because I don't think anything else, if Custodies go away and Necrons get a bit of a hit, what would you be fearing at that point? I'm not too sure. Probably just...
Tao's flying under the radar a little bit.
True. It's weird.
They're coming out, so...
Yeah, it all depends
when the book
drops.
Yeah, they're not out yet, so no one really knows how they're going to impact the scene. I think they'll be, like, somewhere in the region of whatever Orcs are. Tau will be, like, not dissimilar, maybe not quite as scary. It looks like a good book. It's a cool book, like, but it's not, end of the world Tau Codex that we're used to kind of seeing once they get released. I think it'll be fine.
And it's interesting. It's interesting because like a lot of the codexes that are coming out, they actually, Necrons was probably the exception so far this edition, where they get a big glow up. Where most of the cases when the codex comes out, it's almost a side to nerf at that point with the rules they get. I'm
kind of here for it because it doesn't make it for a codex arms race, which has like been problematic in 8th and 9th. And it's nice that the indexes don't become like less valid the more codexes that come out, because they just become less playable against a wider variety of armies. So that's nice too.
And don't sleep on Space Marines either, because they're flying really low down there on the win rate right now. And it could be that GW waits till the summer, but then do during the chapter approved comes out.
Yeah,
what they do with the mission adjustment. So even this data slate that we get coming up soon, it's only going to, the core of it is really only going to last until the summer. And then if they change missions or the mission pack or however that stuff plays, and then whatever they change from like a I know they said like when Chapter Proof comes out, they like to change like the core mission or the change some of the theme to how the missions are playing. That can shake the whole thing up. So what's good now in 3 months could just be completely different, just turned on its head.
That is very, very true and a good point to remember. So again, with Ron, that's why we stick with factions as well sometimes, because ride or die, you know, it changes all the time, and what's good one day is suddenly after one balance pass is now the best thing in the game. Yeah.
Also, like, for real, CSM are just going to dominate the meta whenever that book comes out. That book
interested.
is going to destroy everyone in the game, for sure.
I'm interested. I can't wait for one of us to get our books. I wonder who it's going to be first, because I think we can all have a discussion about it and what we feel about it. Because the thing is, when we see one of the mono God books, we can sort of, even the people that haven't got theirs yet, will get a feeling of where they're going to go with it. Because, like, detachments right now, like, there is possibility for them to go like the old routes with like the Cults of Magic, or like I Had the Plague companies, or they could build it around the unit composition where we have like Bray Herd and stuff like that for see, and then I can expect like a zombie one. So it's all up in the air, but I am super excited to see where we go with our books as and when they come out, and I'm sure the CSM one will answer a few of those questions when that one does eventually pop its head up before it ruins the game. As Dara is convinced.
I was
Listen, man, I just know that Alpha Legion detachment is going to be so strong. Like, uppy downy obliterators, uppy downy vindicators, going to be like lone op for multiple units. Like, it's going to be an enhancement, and because it's Alpha Legion, you'll be able to take as many of them as you want. Where it's just like, this enhancement gives the bearers unit lone op, and it's just a whole army of lone op, uppy downy, good gun stuff. Gonna be
I
great.
actually am really excited to see what they do with Vashdor. I went and got him. He's a gorgeous model.
So cool.
He's just sitting doing nothing right now because his rules are just awful.
I even have the Vashdor dice on it somewhere, but yeah, he's such cool.
Yeah, same. His detachment at the end of 9th edition was fantastic, and I went all in on like getting the decimators and everything, and they just got rid of the decimators like a week later after I bought them. It was so sad, but what you get.
But there's still lots to look forward to. But I think for now we'll probably wrap this one up, guys, because it is cracking on a bit, and I do apologise I've been on for it for quite a while now. But yeah, so if you guys want to just once again just quickly give people know where they can find you if they want to check out your specific content. So again, we'll go with David first.
Tizcanpodcast.com, which is the Tizcan Podcast, or you can find us on the Thousand Suns Reddit or the Thousand Suns Discord server.
Awesome. I've got the link to the Tizcan podcast in the description below, so you can check that out. Dara, what if about the followers of the Blood God? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can catch us on the Red Path on YouTube and Spotify. Hanging out there, talking World Leader stuff, World Leaders hobby as well, if that's up your street, whatever you want to do. Come in and hang out and check out our Discord, which anyone can join, and it's always a good party in there.
Awesome. And obviously, from myself here, the Discussively Resilient podcast, I'm Aiden, you're on the actual channel. Probably don't need to explain too much more. If you're interested in Death Guard and all the nurgly goodness, then you can check out our channel below. Leave a like, subscribe, and go check out these guys' stuff. There's a lot of good work and a lot of dedicated work put into these channels. And Matt, and I think it's something we should all show a bit of gratitude towards, because these things, as I found out when I started this channel, they take time. Like, even just recording a podcast takes time. So, but yeah, for now, I think we're going to leave it there, guys. So thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. If you guys have any closing words, I know Dara has like a closing phrase. Do you want to do your closing phrase, Dara?
No, man, I'm not going to do it here.
Go on, you can do
I'm a
it.
guest,
Go,
man.
go on,
no,
treat
I can't
yourself.
do it.
Go on, Dara.
I can't do it. No.
I don't know if Thousand Suns have a sign off like all these dust or what. I have no idea.
Agnes did nothing wrong.
Cool, we'll go with that. Are you sure you want to do it, Dara? He's done one now. I feel like you've got to do
No,
one.
it's good, bro. It's good.
Sure? Sure? Not even a kill
me burn. Ah!
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
He said the line.
He said the thing. And from self, everyone, stay rotten, and we'll catch you all on the next episode.